Yeah. Do you think you'll marry Mary?
Well, we're already married. We've already been married once. We got married in the first century, and the soulmate relationship is really the only marriage that God has created. So we don't see any need for a paper, but we probably get married, I would say.
If we feel like a party.
Once everyone's been confronted enough about the fact that we're not.
Because clearly there's a lot of significance, isn't there, placed on a certificate of marriage as a binding contract that is acceptable to God. And both of us feel that there's a much deeper binding that happens in your heart, and that's what true marriage is. So there is probably in both of us a little bit of a feeling that we'd like to demonstrate that that's what true marriage is before we go and get a piece of paper. Yeah.
What are soulmates, though? Because this is a lot of people have said, well, this is really new age, this soulmate thing. But your definition of soulmate is quite different from many people's.
Can I say, though, like it's really new age? To me, it's funny how a lot of our teachings are repeated back to us as if they didn't come from us. They came from me 2,000 years ago, the teachings of soulmates. So while the New Age movement has imbibed the teaching of soulmates, whereas the Christian movement has not, and other religious faiths haven't, the reality is I taught about soulmates in the first century, so it's not a New Age movement teaching, it's a teaching of Jesus that was lost, just like there are many other teachings of Jesus that were lost. So
it's not very clearly represented in the New Age movement, though, is it? It's not how we taught it then.
Well, they have two terms. They have a twin flame term, which is like your one and only soulmate, and then they have soulmates, which is many of such, and that's not the case at all. The reality is God's made a complete soul which has masculine and feminine qualities, which splits in half at the time of the first incarnation. And so those two halves belong to each other. And you can't, it's somebody that God made, so you can't go and choose them. It's like, a lot of people would like to, but you can't go and choose them and turn somebody into your soulmate. They are either your soulmate or not. It's just one of those truths of God. And I recognised that in the first century when I was quite young, in my teens, that I had another half of myself. And that's why I did not engage any relationship with any woman all the way through my teens and 20s, which was very unusual in the first century. In the first century, generally, most people were married, particularly a man was married usually by his 20s. And the woman he was married to was usually quite young. And then he obtained a series of wives, generally.
It was a family contract.
Exactly. And usually these contracts were actually made by the parents rather than the children being involved at all. And a lot of times there wasn't much love involved either. And these contracts, which are still occurring today, in fact, in many countries, are completely out of harmony with love of the individual and also out of harmony with God's principles, in the sense that if we love each other, that is the binding contract. And it's only while we love that there is a binding contract. As soon as one of us falls out of love with another, then the contract has failed. And I feel the main reason why contracts fail is that most people are not, or a lot of people are not with their soulmates. And of course, even if they are with their soulmates, they often get confronted emotionally through the relationship. Whereas we get confronted emotionally in the relationship, as you do with your soulmate generally, and what we do is we work through the issue. And that's what we encourage other people to do with their relationships.
Should you marry somebody who's not your soulmate?
Well, you have free will, so you're allowed to decide to do whatever you wish. And if you wish to marry someone who's not your soulmate, then certainly go ahead and do that, if that's what you wish. Free will is a gift given by God. Now, of course, if God made another half of you and you've married someone else who is not your other half, then you've also married someone else who's somebody else's other half. And there are a few of God's laws that are broken in that place, which sooner or later will be confronted. Now, I talked about this in the first century quite frequently with Pharisees who asked me questions about, if a person married one person and then he died, and married another person and he died, and they said 7 times did that, which one would be their husband in the heavens? And I said that none of them would be. That they would become like the angels of the heavens, and I was referring here specifically to the soulmate relationship, which is something that God established. So the woman would end up with her soulmate, not necessarily with any of the 7 that she married.
There are a lot of Christians out there who'll say, well, this is just attacking the family and marriage. The institution of marriage is sacred. if you're representing Jesus, surely you cannot be attacking marriage.
Well, you know, in the first century, almost everybody who heard me speak found something that was confronting. And I suggest that almost everyone today who hears me speak will find something that's confronting. The reality is a paper contract between two people on this earth means nothing to God. And if you do believe it means something to God, then you don't have a very good opinion of God. The reality is that God has already made a contract between the two halves of the soul by creating them as halves. And the reality is, sooner or later in your future, whether it's here on earth or in the spirit world, you will find those halves. I am not promoting immorality. So I'm not promoting a succession of partners as an experiment to find out which one was your soulmate. Right? And I've never promoted that because I believe strongly in morality. However, sooner or later, a person on earth or in the spirit world in their future will find their soulmate. And they will find that that person is the ideal person for them to be with for the rest of their life because they are the other half of themselves. And to me, it's just a scientific fact. It's not. It's like many other things that many religions complain about. You know, when they hear a scientist proclaim a fact, they often get up in arms about those particular facts. But the reality is they're either scientific facts or they aren't. And in the case of soulmates, it's a scientific fact. There are many people, and almost everyone in the spirit world in the higher dimensions knows about this fact. And unfortunately, we don't know about it much on earth. That's the problem.